I would like to lay out the case in favor of online reputation scores. Now, I already did another video on the dangers of online reputation scores, and I'm quite worried about them in a lot of ways because they have the same properties as social credit systems in authoritarian governments. And if you ask the question, is it possible for corporations or collaboratives of colluding people to behave in an authoritarian way? Yeah, it probably is. So I do think there's a lot of risks, and I'm quite worried about online reputation scores. But to be balanced, I think it's important to acknowledge what are the upsides of having such scores. So that's what this video is about. So reason number one is that these scores could ultimately be an alternative to higher education or other types of education. So we know that higher education is super expensive, and I'm a professor. I love higher education. I hope that we always have colleges and whatnot. But the fact that it's not accessible to everyone means we need some ways that people can show that they have the skill sets, they have the habits needed to do a good job in a position that might have historically required a college degree. But perhaps someone without a college degree who has certain skills could do well in that job. And one thing about higher education is that it's not just the head knowledge that you develop from reading the textbook and taking the exams and going to class. It's also the skills of sort of organizing your own time, learning how to show up for class every day, learning to act in a community, learning to work in groups with other people. There's an entire set of skills that's sort of wrapped up in a college degree. And in a lot of ways, I think jobs that require college degrees, they're trying to select for those skills. But the thing is, you don't always need a college degree for some of the skills on that list. In fact, for most of the skills on that list, there are probably a lot of people without college degrees who shine in those skills. So online reputation scores could be ways for those people to show that yes, they know how to do well in group work. Yes, they know how to show up on time. They know how to organize their own life and be self-initiators. If you had scores like that, I think that could help with signaling to potential employers, especially for those without college degrees. Reason number two for online reputation scores is that I think they're happening anyway behind the scenes in companies. And I would much rather have these scores be out in the open and transparent rather than discriminating against people because of some number in somebody's spreadsheet in the corporate headquarters that you can't scrutinize to decide, is that score just, is it okay? Is it channeling power to people who already have a lot of privilege? We need more transparency in the types of scores that evaluate people. And here's an example that I've heard of. Now, I don't have any proof if this is real or not, but I've heard there's a score behind the scenes that tells corporations, do you return products in bad condition a lot? And I can totally see the reason for that kind of score. Like, I only return stuff when I haven't used it and when I don't want it. I think I do a fair job of returning things only when necessary. But if there are people taking advantage of the system who buy clothing and wear it every day for a month and then return it, those people are kind of abusing the system. They're going to cause the cost of the system to go up for everybody else. So I'm actually kind of okay with the fact that the corporations keep this kind of score, and even that they don't allow returns of products for people who have abused customer service in the past. I'm generally okay with that. But if this score is behind the scenes in a company, how do we know that those scores aren't being manipulated in a way that's not really fair? For example, if there's people behind the scenes who can include in that score, how rude are you to the customer service person? Well, maybe the rudeness is a cultural trait and you just have different cultural habits, and that's being built into your score such that you're not allowed to return stuff. There's potential, at least, that that could be discriminatory. So I would much rather have that score be out in the open where it can be scrutinized. My third reason in favor of online reputation scores is that I think they can be used to sort of create healthier spaces online. And here's what I mean. Let me give a couple of examples. So one of them would be someone who's really sensitive, who gets trolled a lot, because trolls, some of them at least, are bullies who want a reaction from someone. So if this sensitive person tends to react negatively and people make fun of their reaction or whatnot, that person may just not go online to avoid the trolls. And I wouldn't want to totally get rid of trolls, because there's all kinds of complexities in terms of what trolling is and who you're shutting out. But if there could be a subset of some social media space where you go there and only people who have a perfect non-trolling score are allowed in that space, I could see that being a healthier space for some people to go. And maybe it's not even all the time. Maybe it's only when you're in a really sensitive mood do you need to make sure there's no trolls online. Then you go into this little space. And I think having different types of spaces with different social norms online would be one way of improving the quality of social media. Now, here's another example of this. We know that there's all kinds of problems with polarization and with people treating the out group with contempt in ways that they probably don't even realize is contemptuous. They just think it's factual. Well, if you can create an online reputation score that's sort of, how good are you at speaking across difference? How good are you at engaging in conversation with people who have different political beliefs than yourself? And if that were incentivized through a higher score of speaking across difference, then I could see we could get more spaces with more productive conversations across difference. Right now, if you're good at speaking across difference, that's not necessarily something that's valued according to the algorithms. The algorithms like inducing outrage and shaming them and putting them in their place. They're less likely to upregulate people who are just good at conversation across difference. And so I would love to see us playing around with a reputation score that's really, do you know how to treat people who are different than you with respect? My fourth reason in favor of online reputation scores relates to the multipolar trap. Now, this might not be a perfect reason. I don't even know if this is a reason in favor, but I do think reputation scores are inevitable. So I want people who are trying to improve the online space, who are trying to disrupt the tech monopolies, who are trying to make the online space more democratic and collectively owned. I want those people to be in on the game. And my fear is if Web 3.0 developers don't try to develop better online reputation scores, they're going to be competed out of the system by the large corporations or by the authoritarian governments who are using these scores. Because it's just like eBay had to develop that reputation score for sellers, or eBay would not have worked as a business model. And I think the same is true of platforms of the future, that you can't really have some of these platforms without ways of governing behavior, ways of sort of keeping people out who are taking advantage of the system. I think the reputation scores are actually necessary. So if a group of people said there's problems and there's risks with online reputation scores, we're going to outlaw reputation scores when we develop online platforms, I just don't think that can actually compete with people who are using online reputation scores. Now, this is a multipolar trap. What is a multipolar trap? A multipolar trap is when you have some behavior, such as polluting, that everybody agrees we would all be better off if nobody polluted. But we know that if we don't pollute, we're going to be competed out of the market. So we pollute because we know we're at least good people. Everybody follows that logic, and you end up in a world where everybody's polluting. So it's really this competitive environment where if you don't do the antisocial thing, then you get competed out of the system. And I do think there's a multipolar trap element to reputation scores. My next reason in favor of these scores is that they can help us find people who are good matches for us socially. And this actually starts to get at what are some better and worse ways of using reputation scores. I think reputation scores and all kinds of scores can be used to sort of initiate a relationship, but should not be used to facilitate the relationship after you first meet. So, I mean, I'm on Meetup. I've met a lot of my good friends through Meetup. I mean, this was years ago. I've been friends with them and we've taken it off Meetup. But if you want to find friends on Meetup, you kind of have to accept that 9 out of 10 times you show up and it's not much fun. It's kind of a bad experience. There's someone who dominates the conversation. There's someone who's kind of rude. And I think a lot of people will just give up on trying to find friends if they know there's a 9 out of 10 shot that it's not going to be a good experience. If Meetup were to introduce reputation scores, I think they could actually sort of increase the chances of a good experience when you first meet a group. And with some people, they might be like, yeah, I would go on Meetup if there were a 50% chance that it were going to be a good experience, but not if it's only a 10% chance. And therefore, if you could sort of create better boundaries for sort of who gets to show up the first time, then I think you can actually bring more people into the system. I do think that could increase the amount of people going out and trying to find communities and find friends, just by reducing the chance that that process of finding new people is so discouraging and demoralizing. Now, I think there's lots of ways this could be abused. Like, there are definitely worries here. But my point here is that these scores could be used well if they're used to help you find people you're likely to connect with. And if they leave the relationship to do its own thing after that. My next benefit of reputation scores is that it incentivizes building of skills. So social skills actually take a lot of practice. And I think one problem we have right now is that people have let their social skills atrophy. So they'll go out and they'll try to meet people, but they get rejected because they have some habits that are kind of prickly and they don't know how to sort of read the room. Social skills are complicated. And if we can incentivize the development of those skills, then I think that would be really healthy for a lot of people to sort of put the effort in to keep up those skills. Now, this can also be other things that are not skills, like following through with commitments you say you're going to follow through with. That's an actual skill, and it's a habit you develop in yourself. And if you know that there's a score that's sort of, do you show up when you say you're going to show up? Then you can develop that in yourself and it incentivizes that. So I know with people who are heads of meetup communities, for a lot of them it's so frustrating when they put so much work into putting together events and a bunch of people say they're going to show up and they don't show up. So if some score could incentivize that behavior and incentivize development of that habit, I do think that could be a positive thing for community development. And then my last reason in favor of these reputation scores is that I think they could be used to create better algorithms. And of course, polarization is one of the big things here, where right now our algorithms promote outrage, they promote hatred of the other side, they promote stereotyping and mischaracterizing of the other. All of that stuff gets clicks, it gets more watch time, but it's so bad for society. So the question is, could we program our algorithms to favor different things, to favor speaking across difference, to favor treating people with respect? And if we're going to redo the algorithms, we actually do need some data to go into the algorithms. So I think intentionally designed reputation scores could actually be used to improve the algorithms that show us different types of content online.